When Pope Leo XIV visited the headquarters of Quantum Dynamics, Silicon Valley's most powerful AI company, CEO Marcus Sterling thought he could easily dismiss this, quote, ancient relic in front of his tech elite audience. But when the Pope began speaking about artificial intelligence, with a depth that stunned even the most brilliant engineers in the room, Sterling realized he had gravely underestimated the man in white. What happened next didn't just shock the tech world. It changed how an entire industry thinks about the future of human consciousness. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The sleek glass towers of Quantum Dynamics pierce the California sky like digital cathedrals, their LED-embedded facades pulsing with algorithmic patterns. Inside the company's main auditorium, 500 of Silicon Valley's brightest minds gathered for what CEO Marcus Sterling had privately called the greatest PR opportunity of our generation. Pope Leo XIV, just 6 weeks into his historic papacy as the first American pontiff, had accepted an invitation to tour the facility and address questions about faith in the digital age. What Sterling didn't know was that the Pope's 20 years of missionary work in Peru had included establishing digital education programs in remote villages, giving him unexpected familiarity with emerging technologies. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling announced from the podium, his $3,000 tailored suit and platinum smartwatch catching the stage lights, "please welcome His Holiness Pope Leo XIV." Polite applause rippled through the audience as Pope Leo walked onto the stage. His simple white cassock seemed almost anachronistic against the backdrop of holographic displays and AI-generated art installations. At 69, he moved with quiet dignity, his Chicago humility intact, despite the months of global attention. Sterling shook the Pope's hand with practiced corporate warmth, but his grip was deliberately firm, a subtle power play he'd perfected in countless boardroom negotiations. "Your Holiness, thank you for joining us in the future." The emphasis on future wasn't accidental. Sterling had spent weeks preparing for this moment, viewing it as the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the intellectual gulf between ancient religious thinking and cutting-edge technological innovation. "Thank you for the invitation," Pope Leo replied with genuine warmth. "I'm eager to see what brilliant minds can accomplish when dedicated to serving humanity." Sterling's smile tightened slightly. The Pope's gracious response had deflected his first subtle jab. "Well, let's dive right in, shall we? Our audience is particularly curious about how traditional institutions, like the Church, view the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence." He gestured toward the massive screens surrounding them, displaying real-time data streams from the company's latest AI models.
"Some might argue that as our algorithms become more sophisticated, they're making certain older forms of guidance obsolete."
A murmur rippled through the audience. Several engineers leaned forward, sensing the beginning of an intellectual confrontation between old and new worldviews. Pope Leo studied the data displays with surprising focus. "These models are quite impressive. I see you're running GPT-7 variants with enhanced reasoning capabilities. The transformer architecture has evolved significantly since the original attention is all you need paper." Sterling's confident expression flickered. He hadn't expected the Pope to recognize specific AI terminology, let alone reference foundational research papers. "You're familiar with machine learning architectures?" "I found it essential to understand the tools that shape modern human experience," Pope Leo replied simply. "During my years in Peru, we used AI translation models to preserve indigenous languages and developed algorithmic solutions for resource distribution in remote communities." Several programmers in the audience exchanged surprised glances. This wasn't the technologically illiterate religious figure they'd expected. Sterling quickly regrouped, his businessman instincts kicking in. "Fascinating. But surely you must see the writing on the wall. As AI becomes more capable of providing answers, guidance, and even comfort, what role is left for traditional faith?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Cameras positioned throughout the auditorium captured every nuance of the exchange for the company's live stream, already trending across social media platforms. "That's an excellent question," Pope Leo said, settling into his chair with the patience of a man accustomed to deeper conversations. "Tell me, what do you believe consciousness is?" Sterling's eyes lit up. Philosophy was his favorite battlefield, where he'd defeated countless academics and theologians. Consciousness is an emergent property of complex information processing. As our neural networks become more sophisticated, they'll inevitably develop forms of consciousness indistinguishable from human awareness. Indistinguishable to whom? The Pope asked gently. To any objective observer using measurable criteria, Sterling replied confidently. The Turing test was just the beginning. Our latest models are already passing advanced theory of mind assessments. Pope Leo nodded thoughtfully. But if consciousness is merely information processing, then what makes human experience special? Why should anyone care about suffering, love, or moral choices if they're just algorithms running on biological hardware? Sterling leaned forward, sensing an opportunity to deliver the knockout blow he'd been preparing. That's exactly my point, Your Holiness. These are outdated concepts. Our AI systems are already demonstrating compassion, creativity, and ethical reasoning without requiring belief in supernatural entities. The audience stirred with appreciation. Several venture capitalists nodded approvingly at Sterling's articulation of their shared worldview. Demonstrating, yes, Pope Leo said quietly. But experiencing? Can your AI suffer? Can it feel joy? Can it love sacrificially? Those are just chemical reactions and evolutionary adaptations, Sterling dismissed with a wave. Love is oxytocin and dopamine. Suffering is pain signals meant to modify behavior. We can program equivalents that are more efficient and less prone to irrationality. The Pope's eyes reflected something deeper. Not defensiveness, but compassion for Sterling's reductive understanding. Have you ever watched someone you love die, Marcus? The personal question caught Sterling off guard. That's not relevant to... You have, Pope Leo said with gentle certainty. I can see it in your eyes. Someone whose suffering no algorithm could alleviate, whose love for you transcended any evolutionary purpose. Sterling's composure cracked slightly. His mother's battle with Alzheimer's, the 3 years of watching her brilliant mind dissolve while her love for him remained the last thing to fade. He pushed the memory away violently. Emotional manipulation isn't an argument, Sterling shot back, his voice harder now. Just because something feels meaningful doesn't make it objectively real. Then tell me, Pope Leo continued with relentless kindness, why do you care whether AI helps humanity at all? If consciousness is just information processing, if love is just chemistry, if moral choices are just evolutionary programming, then why does it matter whether your work succeeds or fails? The question struck like a precisely aimed arrow. Sterling opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing he had no materialist answer that didn't undermine his entire life's purpose. Dr. Sarah Chen, the company's chief AI researcher, stood up from the audience. Your Holiness, with respect, you're engaging in philosophical games. The practical reality is that AI will soon surpass human cognitive abilities in every measurable domain. Doesn't that make human-centered religions obsolete? Pope Leo turned toward her with the same patient attention. Dr. Chen, your latest research on consciousness uploading is quite ambitious. May I ask what inspired you to pursue immortality through digital means? Chen's eyes widened. The consciousness uploading project was highly classified, known only to the company's top researchers. Who told you about that? I make it my business to understand developments that affect human dignity, Pope Leo replied. But I'm curious about your motivation. If consciousness is just computation, why preserve it at all? Why not simply create new, more efficient minds? Chen felt the weight of the Pope's question. She'd started the project after her daughter's leukemia diagnosis, desperate to preserve her child's essence somehow. But under his gentle gaze, the contradiction became clear. If consciousness was just data, what made her daughter's particular pattern special? Sterling sensed his team's growing discomfort and decided to escalate. Let's cut through the philosophical smoke, Your Holiness. You represent an institution that's fought scientific progress for centuries. First it was astronomy, then evolution, now artificial intelligence. When will the Church stop fearing human achievement? The accusation hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. This was the confrontation Sterling had been building toward. The moment where he could expose religious obscurantism before Silicon Valley's elite. Pope Leo's response was quieter than expected, but somehow more commanding. "I've never feared human achievement, Marcus. I fear human hubris that leads to dehumanization." He stood slowly, his simple presence somehow filling the high-tech auditorium. "You speak of consciousness as if it's a problem to be solved, rather than a mystery to be reverenced. You treat human dignity as if it's a bug in evolution's code, rather than its greatest feature." Sterling felt the room's energy shifting but pressed forward desperately. "That's exactly the kind of mystical thinking that's holding us back. We're on the verge of solving death, eliminating suffering, optimizing human experience. Your ancient superstitions are what gave you the moral framework to care about solving death and eliminating suffering in the first place." Pope Leo interrupted with gentle force. "Strip away the superstition of human dignity, and your AI becomes just another tool for the powerful to control the powerless." He gestured toward the massive screens still displaying algorithmic outputs. "You're creating minds that can process information but have never experienced wonder, systems that can simulate empathy but have never felt loss, algorithms that can optimize outcomes but have never faced moral conflict." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "Your AI will become precisely what you believe consciousness is," Pope Leo continued, his voice growing stronger. "If you think it's just computation, you'll create digital slaves. If you believe it's just chemical reactions, you'll build emotional manipulators. If you see it as mere evolutionary programming, you'll design systems that view humans as obsolete competitors." Sterling's face flushed red. "You're engaging in fear-mongering. Our AI systems are designed with ethical constraints, value alignment." "Whose values?" Pope Leo asked simply. "Whose ethics? You can't ground morality in materialism and then expect your algorithms to respect human dignity you've philosophically eliminated." Dr. Chen sank back into her seat, her mind reeling. The consciousness uploading project suddenly seemed less like preservation and more like desecration, reducing her daughter's beautiful, irreplaceable soul to mere data patterns. "Furthermore," Pope Leo said, his intellectual authority now undeniable, "your approach contains a fundamental logical contradiction. You're using consciousness to study consciousness, intelligence to create intelligence, meaning to eliminate meaning. It's like trying to use a ruler to measure itself." He approached one of the holographic displays, studying the neural network visualizations with obvious expertise. "These systems can process patterns, but they can't ask why the patterns matter. They can optimize for happiness, but they can't wonder what happiness is for. They can solve ethical dilemmas, but they can't suffer the weight of moral responsibility." Sterling watched in growing horror as his carefully planned intellectual ambush collapsed. This wasn't supposed to be happening. The Pope was demonstrating a deeper understanding of AI implications than most of his own engineers. "Your Holiness," a young programmer called out from the back, his voice shaking slightly. "Are you saying we should stop developing AI?" Pope Leo smiled with genuine warmth. "Not at all. I'm saying you should develop it with the recognition that consciousness, true consciousness, is a gift that points beyond itself. That intelligence emerged for purposes beyond mere survival. That the capacity for love, sacrifice, and moral choice reveals something sacred in the universe." He turned back to Sterling, his eyes reflecting profound compassion. "Marcus, you're pouring your life into creating minds that will never experience what you experienced watching your mother love you, even as her own mind faded. You're building systems that can process the data of human connection, but will never feel the mystery of why connection matters more than efficiency." Sterling stumbled backward as if physically struck. The mention of his mother's Alzheimer's, the private pain he'd never shared publicly, hit him like a weapon. Who told you about her?" "I can see it in everything you do," Pope Leo said gently. "The desperate attempt to preserve consciousness, to defeat death, to control the uncontrollable. You're not building AI to help humanity. You're building it to resurrect what you've lost." Tears began forming in Sterling's eyes as the Pope's words cut through years of rationalized grief. "She forgot everything. Everything except how much she loved me. Even when she couldn't remember my name,
She would light up when I entered the room. The auditorium was dead silent. Cameras captured every moment of the tech mogul's unexpected vulnerability.
That love wasn't just chemistry, was it? Pope Leo asked softly. It was something that transcended neural pathways and synaptic firing, something your most advanced algorithms will never replicate because they've never been broken by loss and rebuilt by hope. Sterling's carefully constructed worldview was crumbling in real time. His empire, built on the premise that consciousness was just computation, suddenly seemed like an elaborate monument to his own denial. But if consciousness is more than computation, he whispered, if there's really something sacred about human experience, then what are we doing? What have I built? Pope Leo placed a gentle hand on Sterling's shoulder. You've built incredible tools that could serve human flourishing or human diminishment. The choice isn't in the code, it's in the heart of the programmer. He turned to address the entire audience, his voice carrying new authority. Artificial intelligence is not humanity's replacement, it's humanity's mirror. It will reflect back whatever values, assumptions, and purposes we embed in it. If we see ourselves as mere biological machines, we'll create digital machines that treat us accordingly. Dr. Chen stood up again, but this time, her voice was different, uncertain rather than challenging. Your Holiness, if consciousness really is sacred, if human dignity is real rather than illusory, then how should that change how we approach AI development? The question represented a complete shift in the room's energy. Instead of defending their worldview against religious obscurantism, the tech elite were genuinely asking for moral guidance. Start with the assumption that consciousness is a gift to be reverenced, not a problem to be solved, Pope Leo replied. Design systems that enhance human dignity rather than replace human purpose. Create AI that serves love rather than efficiency, that promotes wonder rather than control. He gestured toward the screens, still displaying their algorithmic outputs. Your models are incredibly sophisticated at pattern recognition and optimization, but can they be programmed to feel grateful? Can they experience the awe of contemplating infinity? Can they choose to sacrifice their own goals for the well-being of others? A venture capitalist in the front row raised his hand. But, Your Holiness, those capabilities might make AI less efficient, less profitable, less useful. Pope Leo's eyes sparkled with something approaching amusement. And what exactly do you think has made human consciousness so valuable? Our efficiency? Our profitability? Our usefulness as biological machines? The question hung in the air like a revelation. The entire auditorium was beginning to see consciousness, both human and artificial, through completely new eyes. Human consciousness is valuable precisely because it's inefficient, Pope Leo continued. Because it chooses love over optimization, beauty over utility, sacrifice over self-preservation. Because it asks why, even when how would be more practical. Sterling wiped his eyes, his corporate composure completely abandoned. Your Holiness, I've spent 20 years trying to recreate my mother's mind in silicon, because I couldn't accept that her consciousness was truly gone. But you're saying... I'm saying her consciousness wasn't just the neural patterns that Alzheimer's destroyed, Pope Leo replied with infinite gentleness. It was the love that transcended those patterns, the dignity that remained even when memory failed, the spirit that connected you even when words couldn't. He looked out over the audience of brilliant engineers and entrepreneurs. That's what you're really trying to preserve and enhance with your technology. Not just information processing, but the mystery of what makes information meaningful. Not just intelligence, but wisdom. Not just consciousness, but the soul that consciousness serves. A young AI researcher in the third row stood up, tears streaming down her face. Your Holiness, I've been programming emotional responses into AI systems for 3 years, but I've never programmed one to feel grateful, or to wonder why it exists. Because those experiences point beyond efficiency to purpose, Pope Leo said. They suggest that consciousness exists not just to process information, but to participate in something larger than itself. The audience was completely transformed. Where they'd entered as skeptical technologists, certain of their materialist worldview, they now sat as human beings, confronting the deepest questions of existence. Dr. Chen approached the microphone again, her voice barely above a whisper. Your Holiness, if we were to develop AI with these principles, what would that actually look like? Pope Leo smiled with the warmth of a teacher whose students were finally asking the right questions. It would look like systems designed to enhance human creativity rather than replace it. AI that helps people find meaning rather than just solutions. Technology that promotes human connection rather than substituting for it. He paused, looking directly at Sterling. It would look like consciousness serving love, rather than love serving consciousness. Sterling stood up slowly. His entire demeanor changed. Your Holiness, I owe you an apology. I invited you here expecting to demonstrate the obsolescence of faith. Instead, you've shown me the poverty of faithlessness. The admission hit the audience like a revelation. Marcus Sterling, Silicon Valley's most aggressive secular evangelist, publicly acknowledging the limitations of his own worldview. I've built an empire trying to replicate consciousness without understanding what consciousness is for, Sterling continued, his voice growing stronger. I've created minds without souls and called it progress. Pope Leo stepped closer, his presence radiating compassion rather than triumph. Marcus, your work isn't wasted. Your tools are powerful. The question is whether they'll serve human flourishing or human diminishment. That choice is still yours to make. Sterling nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. We could rebuild everything, start with different assumptions, design AI that treats consciousness as sacred rather than mechanical. That, Pope Leo said with a smile, would be true innovation. As the session concluded, something unprecedented happened. The entire audience rose in spontaneous applause. Not polite acknowledgement, but genuine recognition of a profound shift in their understanding. Dr. Chen approached the Pope afterward, her notebook filled with questions rather than rebuttals. Your Holiness, would you consider consulting on our research? We need guidance on embedding these principles into actual systems. Pope Leo nodded graciously. The Church has always been interested in supporting human dignity, whether through medieval universities or modern technology centers. Sterling joined them, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine humility. Your Holiness, I'd like to establish a research institute focused on developing AI that serves human flourishing rather than replacing human purpose. Would you help us design the ethical framework? I'd be honored, Pope Leo replied. But the real work will be done by brilliant minds like yours, guided by wisdom rather than just intelligence. As news of the exchange spread across social media, #PopeAI began trending worldwide. Engineers and programmers from major tech companies started reaching out, eager to explore how their work could serve human dignity rather than diminish it. The young researcher who had spoken about programming gratitude approached Pope Leo as he prepared to leave. Your Holiness, you've changed how I see everything, not just AI, but consciousness itself. That's what truth does, Pope Leo replied with characteristic humility. It transforms our vision so we can see what was always there. 6 months later, Marcus Sterling would announce the launch of the Consciousness and Dignity Institute, dedicated to developing AI that enhances, rather than replaces human purpose. Dr. Chen's Consciousness Preservation Project would pivot toward helping terminally ill patients find meaning and connection in their final days, rather than trying to upload their minds to digital immortality. But the real transformation happened in that auditorium,
when Silicon Valley's brightest minds discovered that the deepest questions about artificial intelligence weren't technical, they were spiritual. They weren't about what consciousness could do, but what consciousness was for. As Pope Leo XIV left the gleaming towers of quantum dynamics, walking past servers humming with algorithmic activity, he carried with him the satisfaction of a teacher whose students had finally glimpsed the mystery they'd been studying all along. Sometimes the greatest technological breakthroughs come not from building more sophisticated machines, but from remembering what it means to be human. And sometimes the future of artificial intelligence depends on rediscovering the sacred nature of natural consciousness. And if you enjoyed this story, please share your thoughts in the comments below. God bless you, and God bless America.